My 4-year-old granddaughter stopped me in the hallway, with both hands wrapped around 3 of my fingers, the way she always grabbed things she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. I looked down at her. She was wearing the yellow dress my daughter had put her in that morning, the one with the small embroidered daisies at the collar, and she was looking up at me with the particular seriousness that only very young children can manage without any effort at all. "Grandpa," she said very quietly. I crouched down. "Hey, Bug, what are you doing out here?" She looked down the hallway toward the dining room, where I could hear the sounds of 40 people settling into their seats, glasses being filled, the low murmur of conversation from neighbors and old colleagues who had driven in from across Columbus for what I had announced as a family celebration. Then she looked back at me. "She makes Mama cry," my granddaughter said, "when you're not here, every single time." I didn't move. I could hear my own heartbeat. "She does?" My voice came out steady. I don't know how. My granddaughter nodded once, quickly, the way children nod when they have been waiting for permission to say something, and the permission has finally arrived. She pressed one small hand flat against her sternum. "It hurts in here. Mama says that's where sad lives." I reached out and straightened the collar of her dress just to have something to do with my hands. In the dining room, someone laughed at something, a big, easy laugh, and the sound floated down the hallway and wrapped around us like smoke. "Emmy," I said carefully, "can you tell me something?" I pulled out my phone from my jacket pocket, the old one, the one she liked to play with because it had her favorite dinosaur game on it. "Were you playing with this today, out on the back porch?" She looked at it, and her eyes went a little wider. She nodded again. I couldn't make the talking stop. "That's all right," I said. "You did just fine." I held her for a moment. She smelled like the baby shampoo her mother always used. She patted my shoulder twice with one open hand, a gesture she had copied from the adults around her, without fully understanding what it meant, only that it was something you did when someone needed steadying. "Thank you, Bug," I said into her hair. "You did the right thing." I stood up. At the end of the hallway, through the tall glass doors that opened into the dining room, I could see 40 people arranged around the long table, the table Jean had picked out herself at an estate sale in 1997, refinished by hand because she said the bones of it were too good to leave to someone who didn't appreciate them. I could see Nadine at the far end, standing near the window in a cream-colored dress, laughing with the woman beside her, her hand resting lightly on the woman's arm. She looked composed. She looked warm. She looked exactly like the woman I had believed she was for the last 16 months. I watched her for about 10 seconds. Then I turned and walked toward the study, where Ned was waiting. I built my company with a 10-year-old pickup truck, a used transit level, and a reputation for showing up on time. That was it. That was the whole foundation at the start. I was 27 years old in 1990 when I incorporated Aldrich Engineering Consulting in a 2-room office on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, and I spent the first 3 years doing everything myself. The site surveys, the client calls, the invoicing, the taxes on a card table in the corner of our apartment, because we couldn't afford a second office. Jean never once complained about the card table. I met her at a colleague's dinner party in the spring of 1988. She was standing near the bookshelf when I came in, reading the spines with the focused attention of someone who wasn't interested in performing a good time at a party. She had dark hair and reading glasses she kept forgetting to take off. On our second date, I told her I was going to build something. A real company, something that would be standing long after both of us were gone, and she listened to all of it without interrupting once. When I finished, she took a sip of her coffee and said, "I believe you, but you're going to need better accounting software." We were married the following April. Her mother cried through most of the ceremony. I cried once, briefly, at the altar which Jean noted and filed away, and referenced approximately once a year for the next 34 years whenever she wanted to make me laugh. Our daughter Anna was born in 1990, the same year I opened the office. I have a photograph from that period, Jean at the kitchen table with Anna on her lap, and a pile of my invoices spread out in front of her, using her free hand to check my math while the baby slept against her shoulder. That was Jean. She never needed to be asked. She just saw what needed doing and did it, quietly and without announcement, because that was simply how she moved through the world. The company grew. Anna grew. We moved to a bigger house in 1998, a colonial on the north side of Columbus, with a backyard deep enough for Jean to put in the rose garden she'd been drawing plans for since the second year of our marriage. She planted it herself over 2 weekends in May, and she tended it every season after that, with a consistency I found remarkable, and she found unremarkable because that was simply what you did with things you loved. For 20 years, that garden was the best thing on the property. I told her that regularly. She always said I was being sentimental. Jean was diagnosed in the fall of 2019, breast cancer, stage 4. The oncologist was kind and direct, which I appreciated more than I knew how to say at the time. He gave us a realistic picture. She received treatment with the same focused attention she brought to everything else in her life. Not without fear, but without surrender. She lasted 2.5 years. She died on a Thursday morning in March of 2022, at home, in the bedroom we had shared for 33 years. I was holding her hand. Anna was in the chair by the window. Emmy was too young to understand what was happening, but she sat very still in her mother's arms and watched with her grandmother's eyes. After everyone left, I sat alone in the house for a long time. The rose garden was just beginning to come up in the front beds, the first green shoots of the season pushing through the mulch she had laid down the previous October. She had laid it down knowing she would not see what came through in the spring. That detail took me a long time to stop thinking about. I met Nadine at a fundraising dinner for Nationwide Children's Hospital, 14 months after John passed. My oldest friend Beau had called me 3 times about the dinner before I finally agreed to go. He had known me since we were students at Ohio State, and he understood, the way people understand things after 4 decades of watching each other, that I was not a man who was going to be talked into healing on any schedule other than my own. He also understood that sitting alone in a house full of someone else's silence was not healing. It was something else. The dinner was held at the Columbus Museum of Art on a Thursday evening in May. Good wine, 300 people raising money for the Children's Cardiac Unit, which was a cause I cared about for reasons I didn't need to explain to anyone. I sat at a table near the center of the room and spent the first hour making conversation about nothing in particular, and thinking about leaving early. Beau found me at the bar around 8 o'clock with a glass of bourbon in each hand, and the expression of a man who was about to do something he considered generous. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said, pressing one of the glasses into my hand. "She lost her husband about 2 years ago. Heart attack, from what I understand. She's been doing volunteer work with the hospital foundation since she moved here from Cincinnati." "I came to write a check," I said. "You can do both," he said, and steered me by the elbow toward the window. Her name was Nadine Hollister. She was 54, with a composed, unhurried manner and sharp eyes that assessed you in the first second without making you feel assessed. She had been listening to a story from the woman beside her, but turned when Beau said her name, extended her hand, and said it was a genuine pleasure in a way that didn't sound like a formula. We talked for nearly an hour. She asked about the engineering business with real curiosity, specific questions, not the polite surface kind, and she had opinions about development patterns in the Columbus suburbs that were more informed than I expected. She mentioned her late husband once, briefly, and moved past it the way people do when they are still working through something and don't want to perform it in public. I appreciated that, more than I could have explained in the moment. I called her 4 days later. I told myself it was courtesy. We had coffee the following week, dinner the week after that. By July, she had been to the house twice for small gatherings with Beau, and 2 couples we had known since the 90s, and everyone seemed comfortable with her, and she was easy with the people around her in a way that felt genuine. I told myself I was simply enjoying the company of someone who understood what the other side of loss looked like. What I did not see, what I was not positioned to see, because grief had narrowed my attention to whatever warmth was directly in front of me, was what happened every time I turned my back. I learned about it later from Ned, sitting across from me at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in August, with a manila folder between us and the careful expression of a man who has rehearsed what he is about to say because he understands the weight of it. Ned Garvey had been my office manager for 22 years. He was 61, methodical in the particular way of people who have built their reliability out of deliberate practice, and he had a memory for numbers that I had relied on through 3 recessions, 2 major contracts, and 1 lawsuit I would rather not revisit. He came to my office, closed the door behind him, which was not something he did without a reason, sat down across from me, and placed the folder on the desk. He had been writing things down since June, he said, dates and conversations. The 3 times Nadine had come by the office and asked. In the course of perfectly pleasant conversation about the structure of the business, which accounts were operating, which were held in trust, who had signatory authority over which funds, whether I had updated my estate planning documents since Jean passed. He pulled a sheet from the folder, dates down the left side, notes on the right, in his small, careful handwriting. She asked me twice about the pension structure, he said. The second time, she asked specifically whether a spouse would have access to the operating accounts during a period of the owner's incapacitation. I looked at the sheet for a long moment without speaking. He placed a second sheet on top of the first, a photograph of a bank statement, the joint household account that Nadine and I had opened in April for the convenience of shared expenses, groceries, utilities, the maintenance costs on a house this size. The number at the bottom was substantially lower than it should have been. I found this on the counter by the coffee maker, he said. I don't believe she intended to leave it there. I looked at the total and did the arithmetic. Then I set it down and looked out the window at the parking lot, where the August heat was pressing down on everything in that flat, relentless way it does in central Ohio in the middle of the summer. Ned, I said, how long have you been keeping this? Since June, he said. I didn't have enough to bring to you until now. I wanted to be certain I wasn't jumping to conclusions. I nodded. Somewhere in the back of my mind I could hear Jean's voice very clearly. That man has never been wrong about a number in his life. You should listen to him. Write everything up, I said. Every date, every conversation, every amount. I want it documented and signed. I looked at him. And Ned, thank you. I know this wasn't easy. He straightened in his chair the way he always did when something had been decided. That's what I'm here for, he said. He stood to leave and paused at the door. There's one more thing. He reached back into the folder and produced a third sheet, a printout from a public records search. Her husband, the one she told you passed away, he set it on the desk. There's a divorce filing in Hamilton County from 2019. The petition was filed by a man with the same name. The age and Cincinnati address match what she told you. I can't confirm it's the same person without more, but I wanted you to have it. I looked at the printout. Then I looked at Ned. Find out, I said. He nodded once and walked out and closed the door behind him. I sat alone in my office for a long time. Outside, the summer went on doing what summer does, indifferent to everything happening inside the building. My daughter Anna was 32 when she married Perry Ashford, and she was, without qualification, the most capable person I had ever watched grow up. She had Jean's persistence and my stubbornness and a gift for reading situations that I had come to rely on without always telling her so. She had built a solid career as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm and was good enough at it that her company had offered her a director-level role before Emmy was born. She turned it down after Emmy arrived. Perry had suggested, gently and consistently, that the commute was too hard and that Emmy needed stability. I had accepted this the way fathers accept things when they believe the people involved know their own lives better than they do. I should have looked more carefully. I didn't fully understand what was happening until Emmy's pediatrician called me on a Sunday afternoon in September. She explained that she was calling with Anna's permission, that Anna had come in for Emmy's well-child visit 2 weeks earlier, and that the doctor had noticed something she could not address in the moment, but that Anna had subsequently called and asked her to speak to me directly. She described what she had observed in the examination room. She told me that Anna had explained, afterward, what the last 18 months had looked like inside her marriage, the gradual narrowing of her world, the friends who had stopped calling, the way Perry managed her schedule, her access to the car, her finances, the 2 occasions when the narrowing had become something she could not attribute to a cabinet door or a misstep on the stairs. I had to set the phone down on my knee for a moment while she was still speaking. Is she safe right now? I asked. She is aware of her situation, the doctor said carefully. She has asked me to tell you that she has a plan. She asked me to tell you that she loves you, and she asked me to tell you not to do anything yet." "Not yet," I repeated. "She said you would know when." Ned called me on a Wednesday morning 3 weeks before the dinner. The man Nadine had described as her late husband was alive. He was 61 years old and retired and living in Tucson, Arizona, where he had relocated after the divorce was finalized in the spring of 2019. A public records contact Ned worked with in Cincinnati had confirmed the filing, the settlement terms, and the date. There had been no death. There had been no grief. There had only been a story, constructed carefully for men who were too full of their own grief to think clearly about someone else's. I thanked Ned. I sat very still at my desk. Then I made 4 phone calls, one to Bo, one to Ned, one to Emmy's pediatrician, and one to Anna, who answered on the first ring and said, simply, "I've been waiting." I did not sleep the night before the dinner. I lay in the dark for a few hours, and then got up at 4 in the morning, and sat in the study in the chair I had sat in for 30 years. On the desk was the photograph from the top drawer. Jean and me on the front porch of this house the summer we moved in, 1998, Anna on Jean's hip, both of them squinting into the afternoon sun. I looked at it for a long time. Then I took out a piece of paper and wrote 3 things on it. Not the plan. Ned and Bo and the pediatrician had the plan, but the things underneath the plan that only I needed to know. Anna would hear it from me directly, not through what happened at the table. From her father looking her in the eye before the day was over. Emmy would never know the weight of any of this. She would know only that she had done the right thing, and that her grandfather was proud of her. And Jean's photograph was going back on the mantel in the living room. Nadine had moved it to the hall closet in August, along with the ceramic bowl Jean had brought back from a trip to Vermont, and the small framed needlework Jean's mother had made as a wedding gift. She had replaced them with her own things in the way that water replaces air, gradually, reasonably, in ways that each made individual sense, until the living room no longer felt like mine or Jean's or anyone's in particular. It felt like a room being prepared for someone else. The photograph was going back on the mantel before the week was out. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I went downstairs and waited for morning. 40 people sat around the long table when I walked into the dining room. Business associates, old friends, neighbors who had watched this house hold a family through 25 years of ordinary and extraordinary things. They had all come to witness what Nadine had framed as an updated estate celebration. Just a formality, she had said. A few signatures, then dinner. Ned was standing near the sideboard with his folder. Bo was at the far end of the table in the chair I had placed him in, his reading glasses in his breast pocket, his hands folded. Emmy's pediatrician was seated near the window with a small envelope in front of her, containing a written statement she had prepared at Anna's request, documenting what she had observed in her examination room, and what Anna had given her explicit written authorization to disclose. I stood at the head of the table. The room went quiet. I said I appreciated everyone being there. I said I had something I needed to share before anything was signed, and that I was sorry if it interrupted the evening, but that it couldn't wait. I reached into my jacket pocket and placed my phone on the table. Emmy had set a voice memo running by accident on the back porch the previous Sunday when she was playing with my old phone. She had forgotten to stop it when she went inside for lunch. Perry and Nadine had been in the kitchen, close to the open window, believing they were alone in the house while I was out in the garage. What the recording contained was not dramatic. It was not raised voices or anything that would play well in a movie. It was 2 people discussing a business transaction in the unhurried voices of people who have been planning something long enough that it no longer requires any particular caution. Perry's voice said that once the amended trust was signed, they had 60 days to file the management transfer to the LLC before my attorney would be in a position to review the full language. Nadine's voice said Anna would not be a problem, that she had been very cooperative, that she understood what was at stake if she wasn't. The recording lasted 47 seconds. I watched the room as it played. I watched confusion become concentration, concentration become comprehension, comprehension become something colder and harder and very, very still. I said, "Ned." Ned walked to the head of the table and opened his folder and read. He read dates of withdrawals from our joint account. Our joint account, the one I had opened in April for household expenses, the one Nadine had suggested as a matter of simple convenience. He read the amounts, each one calibrated to fall below the $10,000 threshold that triggers automatic federal bank reporting. He read the 14-month running total. He read the dates of Nadine's visits to the office and the questions she had asked about operating accounts and power of attorney and signatory authority. He read the findings from the Hamilton County Public Records search, the divorce filing, the 2019 settlement date, the current address of the man Nadine had described to me, to Beau, and to every person in this room as her late husband. He read for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. His voice did not waver once. When he closed the folder and stepped back, I said, "Beau." Beau rose from his chair. He was 66 years old and had practiced law in Columbus for 38 years, and he explained, without editorializing, what he had found when he reviewed the documents I had been presented for signing. He described provisions buried in the amended trust language that would have transferred broad operational authority over the business accounts to a second party, identified in the document only by position, not by name, within 90 days of execution. He described the LLC registered in Perry's name that would have received that authority. He explained, in plain terms, what could have been moved, transferred, or liquidated within those 90 days, and what my legal remedies would have been afterward. He said it clearly, in the voice of a man who wants to be remembered accurately. Then I looked toward the kitchen door. Anna walked in. She was wearing a gray sweater and dark slacks, her hair pulled back, simply dressed like herself, which was exactly what she had come to be. She walked down the side of the room with her chin level and her shoulders straight, and she did not look at Nadine, and she did not look at Perry. She looked at me. I held out my hand. She took it, and her grip was hard and certain and warm, and I held on with everything I had. Perry was on his feet before she reached the table. He moved toward the side exit, and stopped, because standing in the doorway were 2 men from the law firm Beau had retained and a private investigator who had been working with Ned out of Cincinnati for the past 3 weeks. Behind them, through the open doorway, I could see the driveway where a Columbus Police Department patrol unit was parked, engine running. Perry looked at them. He looked at Beau. He looked finally at me across the full length of the table, across the ruins of 2 years of careful planning, and for the first time I saw his face without the performance on top of it. What was underneath was smaller than I had expected. It usually is. Nadine had not moved from her chair. She was sitting very straight, her hands folded on the table in front of her. The warmth was gone from her face, not gradually, not the way warmth fades, but completely, the way a light goes out when the power fails. What remained was something I had no name for and did not recognize as belonging to the woman I had spent 16 months believing she was. It didn't. It belonged to someone who had built herself entirely out of strategy and found, when the strategy collapsed, that there was nothing underneath it that was actually hers. She looked down at her folded hands. She did not say a word. Ned opened the side door and held it for them both. The guests stayed for a long time. Some left quickly with the slightly dazed quality of people who have witnessed something they hadn't prepared for and need time alone to process it. Others stayed, coming to find me in small groups of 2 or 3, pressing my hand or shoulder, saying the things that decent people say when they want you to know they are with you without making it about themselves. I thanked each of them. I meant it every time. Anna and Emmy stayed. At 2 in the afternoon, I found them in the rose garden. Anna was sitting on the iron bench Jean had positioned along the south wall because it caught the October light in a particular way she had always loved. Emmy was crouching near the base of the largest climbing rose, examining something close to the ground with great concentration. I sat beside my daughter without speaking for a while. The October air was cool and dry and still. A squirrel ran along the top of the fence and disappeared into the neighbor's yard. "How are you?" I asked. Anna was quiet for a moment. She turned the question over the way she had always turned questions over, even as a little girl, as though every question deserved a real answer. "Like I've been holding my breath for a year and a half," she said, "and I just now remembered how." I put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me, and we sat like that in the garden her mother had planted. Then Anna said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me say all of it." "All right," I said. She told me. She told me about the gradual narrowing, the friction that accumulated month by month, each incident small enough to explain away, until she was living inside something she hadn't chosen, and couldn't see the walls of from the inside. She told me about the letter she had written me in February that never arrived. She told me about the nights she sat on the bathroom floor, because it was the only room with a lock. She told me about the morning she had tried to call me from a neighbor's phone, and Perry had found out before she finished the call. She told me all of it in the flat, careful voice of someone who has survived something, and is still working out what to do with the fact of having survived it. When she finished, I said, "Anna, look at me." She looked at me. "You protected your daughter," I said. "Every single day in impossible circumstances, you protected Emmy. That's what I see. Not the silence, the protection. Your mother would have seen the same thing. I know that without any doubt." Anna's jaw tightened. Her eyes went bright and she looked away, out at the roses, and breathed carefully through her nose. Then she looked back at me. "She would have figured the whole thing out in about a week," she said quietly. 10 days, I said. Maybe. Anna laughed, a short, real laugh that caught her off guard, and pressed her lips together, and shook her head, and didn't wipe the tears on her face, because she had already done all her crying, I think, in all the months before anyone knew to look for her. Emmy stood up from where she'd been crouching, and came over to the bench, carrying something very carefully in cupped hands. "Grandpa, look," she said, holding her hands out toward me, a ladybug walking slowly across her palm. "That's a good one," I said. "Can I keep her?" she asked, with complete seriousness. "Ladybugs like to be outside," I said, "but you can watch her for a while." She accepted this, turned back to the rose bed, and crouched down to resume her observation. Anna watched her. Neither of us said anything for a long time. The afternoon settled around the three of us, cool and gold and still, and I thought about Jean laying down the mulch in October so the roots would stay warm through the winter, knowing she wouldn't see what came through in the spring. She had known. She had done it anyway. That was what it looked like to love something, with everything you had, with no guarantee of what came next. That evening, after Emmy had fallen asleep in the room that had always been hers in this house, I went to the hall closet and lifted down the box Nadine had packed Jean's things into. Jean's photograph was inside, wrapped carefully in a dish towel. I carried it to the living room and hung it back on its nail above the mantel. The nail that had held it for 25 years, the nail I had put there myself the week we moved in, because Jean had said that was where it needed to go, and she was right. Jean, at 36, on the front porch of this house the summer we moved in, holding Anna on one hip, squinting into the afternoon sun, laughing at something I had just said from behind the camera. She looked exactly like herself. She always had. I stood and looked at it for a long time. Then I found Ned in the kitchen, finishing up the last of the paperwork at the table, a cup of coffee beside him going cold. I told him I wanted to talk about his role going forward, effective immediately. I told him about the salary adjustment I had been meaning to make for 3 years, and had kept finding reasons to defer. I told him about the partnership agreement Beau had drafted, and that I had signed that morning, which gave Ned a 15% stake in the firm. Something I should have done 5 years ago, and that I was doing now because it was right, and because he had earned it 10 times over, by paying attention when it mattered most. Ned listened without speaking. When I finished, he looked at the kitchen table for a moment. "Jean would have pushed you to do this years ago," he said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry it took me longer." He nodded once, accepting that the way a man accepts something that is true and doesn't require any further discussion. "I'll see you Monday," he said. He got his coat and let himself out the back door, and I stood in the kitchen alone and listened to the quiet of the house settling around me. It was different from the quiet of the months after Jean died. That had been the silence of absence, the specific, suffocating silence of a house where someone is no longer breathing. This was something else. The quiet of a house that has been through something and is slowly, carefully, finding its way back to itself. I went to the study. I sat down at the desk. I turned on the lamp and opened the notebook I kept in the center drawer and wrote 3 words on the first blank page. Not a plan, not a record, just 3 words for myself. for the man I would be when enough distance had passed to see this whole year clearly. She is everywhere. Not Nadine. Jean. In the rose garden she had planned and planted and mulched against a spring she knew she wouldn't see. In the daughter who had protected her child through something I hadn't known to stop in time. In the granddaughter who had pressed a small hand flat against her chest and said, "It hurts in here, Grandpa. That's where sad lives." Using words that had come from somewhere, passed along through the people who loved her. The way certain things move between generations without needing any particular amount of time to do it. I closed the notebook. I turned off the lamp. Outside the study window, the October night was clear and cold over Columbus. The kind of night that comes in fall when the air finally means it, when the season has stopped pretending it might turn back. Upstairs, my granddaughter was sleeping. Down the hall, my daughter was too. And on the mantel in the living room, Jean was back where she had always belonged, looking out over a house that still knew her name. I went to bed, and for the first time in longer than I could honestly say, I slept.